And welcome back, fourth and long. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFL review. And ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by the voice of the USAFL, Mr. Brian Barrish. Brian, how you doing, sir?
Good day, Donnie. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am not doing too bad, sir. On International Women's Day, we are going to go over the AFLW round six. And boy, oh boy, was it an interesting round. I gotta say, sir, what do you think of some of these rather interesting results?
A lot of lopsided scores, and a lot of high scores. Somebody, Adelaide put up 85 points in their win over Gold Coast, and mind you, that was probably a Premiership favorite against the team that is in contention for the wooden spoon. But I just want to point out that Adelaide's 85 points would have beaten 9 of the men's teams that played in the AME Community Series this week. So for those of you who say that there's no scoring in the women's game, no.
This round definitely proved that, considering the fact we had 85, 75, 51, 60. Some of the winning margins were absolutely ridiculous. So speaking of some crazy, ridiculous winning margins, we'll hop right into the first game. And I gotta say, even though the ending margin was 35, North beats Richmond 67-32 by a grand total of 35 points. I have to say, I was still quite impressed with Richmond's performance in this game against quite a very good and maybe surging North Melbourne team.
Well, Richmond, I think of all the teams in that part of the ladder, I think they've maybe looked the best so far. And when you look at some of the players that are up and coming, Christina Bernardi, who was coming off a 3-goal game in the VFLW, they're playing. Richmond's players are playing with Port Melbourne, of course, but Bernardi had kicked 3 goals in that first game. She follows it up with another 2 goals here. Brennan is always reliable to kick a goal as well. They got good out of Ellie McKenzie and Harriet Cordner, but like you said, North now that they've gotten those couple of rough games out of their patch, Emma King. It's great when you can have a ruck who can kick goals, and she kicked a couple in this game. Abatangelo had a really good game. Jazzy Gardner had 22 touches.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, all of a sudden they've kind of found back, and that's the thing with this short season. 1 or 2 game means a lot, but with a team like North Melbourne, they may not lose another game the rest of the season. Now they are going to have some tough contests coming up, but Richmond in about a year or two, I think maybe if not next year, then the year after is going to be a very competitive ball club, and you're seeing that even now. Even though, like you said, they went down by 6 goals, I think they didn't embarrass themselves one bit.
No, and the other thing you got to look at too, and I'm not an excuse maker as a coach. You can't make excuses, but not having Mo Conti in that
No.
lineup for Richmond definitely did not help when you face a superstar lineup that is the North Melbourne team. So you got to say there was Ellie McKenzie steps up and shows why she was the number one draft pick this last year, showing that she is going to be an incredible superstar over the next couple of years. But this Richmond team, like, I've been thoroughly impressed with their progression. They have just gotten better and better each game. And even in this, like I said, the margin is far worse than what I actually think this game was. This game was quite competitive for long stretches of time. So we'll move off the Richmond Love Fest. We'll move up and we'll go to Brisbane v GWS in a 55-17 win by Brizzy by 38. And Brisbane continues their strong performance against a GWS team that just kind of cannot find that rhythm yet.
No, and there's one of the teams that I think coming into the season, everybody seemed to think that they were going, that this was their year, that they were going to make a deep run, or at least, if they could get inside the top 6, that they would be able to. But now they're sitting firmly outside of it. But Brisbane, this is the Brisbane of old. This is, players like Lutkins, like Orlo Dwyer, who's having a really good season. You talk about young players, 22 years old. How about Jess Wuchner coming back, playing her 30th game, kicking her 30th goal? It's an inspirational story, especially for those of us in the States that know her. And for those that don't remember, She did play a couple of months with the Boston Lady Demons back in 2015 during that little spell in between the exhibition era and the beginning of AFLW. And there's a really good article that was on her, and unfortunately the outlet escapes me about really the setback, both physically and mentally, in terms of overcoming that lightning strike from last year, finally getting into the lineup and really showing flashes of her old self. But yeah, GWS did look a bit lethargic, especially in the beginning of this game. But I mean, still have promising talent. Eva had 22 touches. Alice Parker had 16. I mean, it's going to be a rough go for them down the stretch. And Brisbane, is just now starting to catch fire, and now they've got to be considered at least a chance to make the grand final.
Definitely, for sure. And this is really, if you look at it, this was the round where it was like the great get the lower, not so great teams. It was kind of, this was feeding time for so many percentage games, and it was kind of, it did kind of damper the round a little bit, unfortunately. But the crazy part is you get to see some of the greatness that is some of the top teams. I mean, and it's going to be quite a struggle to see who's going to make the finals this year.
I think at the end of the day, all the teams that were supposed to win won. I think all the teams that were supposed to win, and there was really no question about it in any of these games. But yeah, it was an interesting round in that sense, because yeah, we're starting to see how good these teams can be when up against that certain level of competition.
Yep, and we gotta go to it. Unfortunately, I never like seeing these games, but the Adelaide Crows absolutely dismantle the Gold Coast Suns 85-50 by 70 points. There for a while, I have to admit, Brian, I thought this Crows team was going to put up triple digits the way it was going.
It reminded me a little bit of like an Adelaide Gold Coast men's game from like 2012, where you have a team that is very much on the rise in Adelaide, and they're Adelaide's Adelaide. Now Erin Phillips is gonna Erin Phillips, and she had the game. Chelsea, how about Chelsea Randall? With all those goals, kicking 4 goals I'm sorry, Daniel Ponta rather kicking 4 goals, Randall kicking 2, Phillips kicking 2. Ann Hatchard had her prerequisite 21 touches. And they ran over a team that is, again, I think is still putting in the effort, and they're still young. They're really missing. I think the Sarah Perkins being out for the season with that MCL injury is devastating. And unfortunately, it was the end of a really good story. Considering that Adelaide had written her off a couple of years ago, and she was really one of their best players. And so I think it's a deflated Gold Coast team. They are out of the playoffs now, or out of the finals contention with this loss. How about in a defeat, Allison Drennan racking up 29 disposals, including and 4 marks. I think there's still a long way to go. I think they're still finding their legs. But Adelaide showing that they're the Adelaide team of old, and winning a game convincingly.
Yeah, it's Stevie Lee Thompson with another great performance as well for Adelaide too. But I gotta say that I was still impressed that the Gold Coast girls just did not stop fighting. I
No.
mean, some of their defenders had some really good plays, and then their other superstar forward, Kalinda Howard, she started pushing up the field, trying to help out her teammates as much as possible. I know she's had a few quiet weeks, so she got involved there. So this is a Gold Coast team. I think if the youth can progress a little bit, maybe see some of these clubs with some older players start to retire, and you'll start evening out. I think eventually this Gold Coast team has some building blocks to work with, but it's just, unfortunately, this year is going to be a year a little bit with pain. Unfortunately, losing Perko last week to that knee injury really did hurt them going forward too. Not that they progressed very much past about midfield there for a bit, but unfortunately it happened. So we will move on from that to another one. And how the St. Kilda Saints have fallen since that first round, a 66-22 44-point loss to the Demons. And the D's, I think, are starting to kind of get back to the perform that they had shown early in the year. But I mean, is this more of the Demons class, or is St. Kilda maybe a little not what we thought after that first round win over the Doggies?
We've had a couple of people on social media actually ask this question, like where was that St. Kilda team that came out and won so convincingly over Footscray in week one? And I think they're back. They're back in a couple of months ago. I think that's the answer to that question. But I mean, listen, the Demons are as good of a team as they came out to be. And this is one of those games. Good teams win games like this.
Mm-hmm.
St. Kilda was not they were not a pushover. They weren't a Gold Coast type team, and their players stepped to the floor. Look at 5 players getting 20 or more disposals in this. Paxman 24, Zanker 23. Hanks and Pierce, Lauren Pierce with 22, Kate Hoare with 20, and also spreading out the. What about Daisy Pierce, somebody who had 3 goals her entire AFLW career coming into this match, kicked 2.
Before you go real quick,
Yeah.
I gotta say this was the coaching that has to be one of the coaching moves of the round, is to take your experienced player who was used to the midfield and had moved back a little bit to give you some experience. The coaching decision to be able to move her forward, let her get some confidence, not only into her game but into the other clubs by knocking those goals through. And Zanka, oh my God, what a performance from her! She had a couple of absolutely marvelous plays, including the goal assist to Daisy Pierce for either her second or third goal, where she just went through a pack and was able to slip a nice little curl kick to Daisy leading out from the goal square. I mean, as a coach, I tip my hat to the Melbourne Demons coaching staff, because to have the ability to put your superstar up front where you needed the help because you hadn't been kicking goals in the previous couple of games, I tip my hat to you, sir. That probably won you the game there for sure.
Well, this is the sort of game you do that in, because if they lose, they're 3-3, and they're in trouble. I mean, as it is, they're 4-2. They're only 2 games out of first place, and listen, you ask Daisy Pierce to do something like that, she's going to do it, and she's going to, if you don't contain her, you're gonna pay, and that's exactly what happened. And the fact that they spread out, I mean, they had what is that, 7 different goal kickers. So St. Kilda, Peter Cyril's going to have to look at this game and say, look, we probably could have won this game this week, and we mentioned in the lead up about Petrakios, who her and Catherine Phillips and Hannah Priest each had 17 disposals, but it's not going to get any easier for St. Kilda. I think they're in tough straits right now, but Melbourne, all of a sudden now they're in the thick of things too.
Yeah, and I think St. Kilda is going to go through a little bit of the growing pains. I mean, they've got such a young list in that midfield, and sometimes if they get run over by an experienced midfield like with Paxman and that at Melbourne, I think that was a growing pains game. That's going to be a game that hopefully their coaching staff takes them aside and kind of shows them the experience and what the experienced midfielders do to get the footy and to be able to push it forward. And just, I mean, it's really hard when a great goal scorer like Greiser is all the way in the back 50 just to get a touch. I mean, that was how hard it was for St. Kilda to get it out of their own zone when they just could not clear the footy. And you just cannot take that amount of beating without eventually giving up a few goals. So that it's a growing pains game, unfortunately, for this St. Kilda team. And I mean, they had defied a little bit as one of the few expansion teams that had been up further in the ladder. So I think unfortunately they're starting to slowly kind of dip down to where I think they were kind of expected to be this year. But we will move on from there. We will move on to Carlton v Geelong, a 64-31 and a 33-point win for the Carlton Blues. Miss Maddie Prasparkas comes back after her suspension, and they kind of take it out a little bit on a Geelong team that I think a lot of people was expecting this to be a bigger blowout than it was. So I got to tip my hat. The Cats actually played pretty well despite the final score.
Yeah, and if you look at that they gave up, they really fought them in that first quarter. It really was the second quarter that let them down when they in a when the scoring is the way it is, when you get out kicked 2-0 in a single quarter, I mean, that really was the difference. And, as you mentioned, Prospakis, 28 touches in her first game back, kicking goal as well. Grace Egan had 24 as well. Lucy McAvoy had a solid game with 19. Georgia G with a couple of goals. Vesio with a couple of goals as well. Carlton is very good at spreading the ball out, and you have to be able to contain, again, if you're not able to contain two of the best players in the competition, Vesio and Prespakis. But again, this is not a embarrassing. I think, like you said, I agree with you. Geelong played really, really well. Webster had 22 touches. Amy McDonald had 20 as well. There's some good, solid players. Julia Crockett-Grills, who had played in the VFL for a fair bit, she had a good, solid game in this one. Sophie Vanderhoovel had 17 touches as well. So, then this does eliminate Geelong from finals contention, and this is another one where it's going to take them maybe about a year or two. You'd mentioned with St. Kilda as well. This is yet another expansion team it's still going to take them another couple of years before they're really able to. But they've got decent talent. It's just a matter of how they can develop and how they can develop their juniors as they come up.
Yeah, definitely completely agree with that. And this has kind of been Geelong's kind of MO this season. They always, the first quarter, they are in it.
Yeah.
They're always tight with whoever they're playing. And it's just like, I don't know if it's conditioning. I don't know if it's breakdowns because of tactics. I'm not sure. But it's like the second quarter and kind of on is when, if a team can kind of get a few goals up, they kind of rattle this Geelong team, and then it just kind of all falls apart like the proverbial house of cards.
And I think Paul Hood's doing his best. He is a very very well drilled coach, and I think he's doing his best with what he has. And I know that they've been banged up with injuries, but you know what I mean. It is gonna take them a season or two. I think this year there was the hope that they would be more competitive than they are, but I don't think they've played. I think they've really played as good as they have, considering who they've gone up against this season.
Definitely, for sure. And then we move on from a really good game to a game I have to be honest was after the first half, I was like, this is going to be a great game. This is going to be one of those tough slugfest game that's going to come down to the wire. And oh my gosh, in the second half, did it change, where Collingwood beats the Western Bulldogs 51-15, a 36-point lead. And Collingwood is stamping their name at the top of the ladder, saying, we are flag contenders for sure.
This, I'm with you. I'm watching this game at halftime, and Collingwood's first 8 scoring shots were behinds, and I'm like, what is happening here? And almost like they flipped the switch. They 4 goals in the third quarter, an additional third in the final term, and they win going away. And the problem is that they just started to pick their spots there. And then you can't let Chloe Malloy have the type of game that she had. You can't let Davy with the round high with 28, or I think she was second overall with 28 disposals. Malloy had a couple of goals. Abby Maloney had 2 goals, really, really coming out of nowhere. Her first 2 in her debut, kicking 2 goals in her first game. Tarney Brown had 1 with 15 touches as well. And the Bulldogs, they were really competitive. I mean, Blackburn was doing Blackburn things. Brooke Laughlin had a great start to the game as well. But in the end, I mean, Collingwood, they're flag contenders unless anybody comes about them. And then you look at they are going to have some difficult games down the stretch, but my goodness, I mean, that is what, again, they look like a premiership side. And that's, that second half really showed it. That's what good teams do. And they just showed it there.
Well, and the scary part about it is they took a Doggies team that, honestly, going into this game, I was worried that this was the first team that was going to step up against Collingwood this year that had the guns and the ability to beat that stellar defense that they have. Livingston, Schleicher, and Butler have been absolutely impenetrable this season. I don't know what they did this year. Ruby Slicer came out of nowhere. Livingston is just as solid as he has years before, and Butler has just been really good. And the Bulldogs, it was the same thing. I really honestly thought Izzy Huntington and Bonnie Toogood would be the kryptonite to this threesome's Superman. I honestly thought so. I honestly thought this was going to be the game that maybe showed the chip in the armor that was the Collingwood defense, and boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, they were non-factors, especially in the second half. And I think, they were the hottest team in the league coming into this game. Everybody was eyeing this, saying, "Listen, they've won 4 in a row after looking." St. Kilda had played. We have to say, St. Kilda played their best game of the season against the Bulldogs, because we were saying that earlier. But now they're. Now there's the question is that what does this team have in the tank left for the last 3 games, and they're going to need, if they want to have if they deign any sort of fantasies of having a run, they have to win games like this, and they didn't, and they just like completely disappeared in the second half, and Collingwood did what good teams do, and they ended up winning.
I completely agree, and this will their next game, round 7 for the Doggies, is going to be the make or break it. It's you hate saying it with 3 rounds left, but it could potentially be a must win to keep their finals hopes alive. So we move off of that one. And if we thought the Suns game was bad, this one was just as ugly. Frio beats West Coast Derby 2.0 75-8, a 67-point lead in Optus Stadium. Wow. I mean, was this the ineptitude of this West Coast team because of all the injuries that they've had to deal with, or is this Frio team just showing why maybe they just had one bad game against Brisbane?
It's a little from column A and a little from column B. I thought at the beginning of the season that Fremantle, one, that their talent would carry over, and two, that they would still be completely pissed off about what happened from last season, to think that they would to really that no one was going to get in their way. And yeah, they had that one bad game against Brisbane, and they're, as you mentioned, Donnie, the Eagles are hurting. The Eagles are, they're struggling. They've got a lot of injuries. I don't know that they've recovered from Dana Hooker's injury at this point. I mean, they do have players like Grace Kelly. They do have Aisling McCarthy, who led with 22 disposals. But Bowers and Antonio, how about Gemma Houghton, surrounded by blue jumpers, as they say on the Outer Sanctum, 5 goals. Sabrina Duffy with 3. I mean, those are Roxy Rue with 2. These are players that are going to be sustaining this team, and really, I say it, they're going to be sustaining the sport for some time. I mean, we're not just talking about best players on, we're talking about really good players that are going to develop into AFLW superstars, and they're already playing extremely well, and they're all on the same team. I think that's the thing. I think Fremantle, I mean, they're really asserting themselves as I still think they're going to end up winning the entire thing. Collingwood be damned. This is listen, I think they got an absolute gift from the scheduling, from the schedulers. There's no reason why they should have played a second game. I mean, I understand why it happened, but they're playing. If we were talking about 5 and 6 on the ladder, if we were talking about 1 and 2 on the ladder, even if we were talking about 13 and 14 on the ladder, then it makes a lot more sense to me. And I think this game, obviously the game was a lot more competitive. It's not. And it when you have one of the best teams in the league, it's one of the worst, this was going to happen. And Fremantle went in and did work, and look what happened.
Yeah, and I've heard a few people with that. It's like, why did they play each other? Well, I look at it like this: is that if they don't play each other with all of the restrictions because of Western Australia and all that, then you have 2 teams that have one less game in the round, and it's already kind of funky with only
It'll
playing
be a
9
mess,
games
yeah.
this season. So it's like it was never going to be perfect. Unfortunately, this was the only way to keep everything going, as long as Western Australia had their hard lockdown. So I understand it's going to boost Frio's percentage. They're going to be up there a little bit more than some of the other teams, but I think in the long run, if they get into the finals, they're going to have to play some of the better teams. So we're going to find out if this Frio team is for real or not. I don't know. I understand the frustration. I really do. This is even more of the call that if we could eventually get these girls playing every single team at least once, it would make everything a lot better. But we're in weird times. We're in COVID times. You gotta have to adjust. You're gonna have
Oh
to.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's no use really complaining about it because it's the way it is. They got a game in,
Mm-hmm.
so everybody's played the same amount of games. I know it's going to be a little lopsided, but I think it'll all work out in the end in the finals.
Yeah, I think it will as well. I just, you look at some of these, and even like this week, it's like, and there was the joke is that they, people had been screaming for them to get rid of conferences for the first 3 years, and they finally did, and now all of a sudden, because of the way the restrictions panned out, everybody was playing. The Victorian teams were playing each other, and the non-Victorian teams were playing each other. Now that's going to break up a little bit over the last 3 rounds, as we're going to talk about. But yeah, you know what I think the question is that do you want a season, or do you want to not have a season, or do you want to have something where again everything is fluid? I'm glad that the last 3 games were finally chalked down, but it's you there's a lot of questions that can be asked.
I definitely agree, and that is a great transition to one of the topics of the week.
Look at us segue.
Oh, it's absolutely perfect. Couldn't have timed it any better, even if we tried. No, ladies and gentlemen, we didn't. For the first time this season, more than one round of fixtures has come out, and they have finished rounds 6, 7, 8, and 9. Sir, how happy are you to know that we don't have to sit here and go, we have no idea who's playing who the next round?
No, I think it's good. And listen, we all know that this was that putting the season together was going to be a challenge because we didn't know listen, you don't know from day to day with this thing how things are gonna pan out. I mean, the league, God forbid the league shuts down tomorrow. We have a similar situation like we had last year where there's an outbreak and we go into a 2-week lockdown or a 3-week lockdown. You don't know. Now, thankfully, we only had the one situation, and my goodness, we didn't miss a single beat. We didn't miss a game. I mean, there were a couple of delays there. There was a couple of delays in announcing matches, but we've had 6 full rounds of football, and we apparently are going to have 3 more, barring anything unforeseen. I think now, and I'm sure this helps the coaches a little bit, because now, for teams like that are among the also rans, the Suns, the Cats, the Eagles, the Tigers, they're going to take it one day at a time, but they can also maybe start to plan. Maybe this might be a good way to look at some of the younger players again. So, and this way they can kind of match up because they know who they're going to play down the stretch. But for the other teams at the top, now, they are still in that one game at a time attitude, but now they know who they're going to have to go through to get to the finals, like to get down this last round. And it's just like, listen, there is, it's a straight knockout, unlike the AFL where there's a double chance. How coveted are those top 2 spots going to be? So it's good especially for those teams that are, any team in the top 7, any of the teams with a winning record right now could be in that, could end up in the top 2 and get that coveted bye into the semifinals. So I think as coaches, it'll help. As fans, I think it'll help us as well, because now we can kind of see the permutations a little bit better as we get down the stretch there.
Yeah, and just looking at round 7, 8, and 9, there's some absolutely delicious games that they are going to give us with some absolutely top.
All right, Bruce.
Going, you got to give the guy a little bit of love. Unfortunately, he will be retiring, but he will be missed. He will thoroughly.
He's the best. He really
is. It's hard to argue it. It really is.
Yeah.
But I'm I'm looking at round 7. There's so many good ones. Round 8 and round 9. I cannot wait. Round 9 has probably the most anticipated game, but we will talk about that in a few weeks. We don't want to tip that too much. And since we have so much positivity, we gotta kind of go to a tiny bit of reality. And I hate saying this, we really didn't talk about it last week with Gemma, but we really got to talk about it. Is the kind of devastating round of injuries, with several ACL injuries going down over the last few weeks. I mean, are you at all concerned about the number of ACLs that have happened this year?
You know what? We have this conversation every year, and every year it's just I mean, there is some concern, and I know that there's a lot of people. Listen, there's footy players here in the U.S. That are looking at that. In fact, Amy Arundel, who plays for the New York Magpies, did a really good piece about that and I seen it on social media a little bit earlier, but it's always concerning when you see the amount. And listen, we even saw it in VFLW with Jess Trend, who played for North Melbourne a few years ago, making a comeback with Hawthorn. Had a really good game last week and ended up doing her ACL in the fourth quarter. We mentioned Perko. That's an MCL injury, not an ACL injury. So same result. Unfortunately, she's going to be done for the year, and hopefully she'll be able to play VFLW a little bit later on, or perhaps play the state league up in Queensland if she ends up being based up there. But it's with any other season, and unfortunately we're seeing this because of so many happening over the last 2 weeks. So hopefully, I mean, we can maybe, like I said, I know there's a lot of research being done to see if they can maybe get a little bit more of a handle on it. It's a contact sport. It's a sport with a lot of stop and sport, like basketball, where you see a lot of these injuries. Well, I mean, it's a matter of seeing what you can do to try and more and more training. I think that's the other thing, is that these women, that if they're able to concentrate on this, I think a little bit more, go back to it all goes back to like the pay and the full time and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Does that completely obliterate the problem? It won't, but I think that if you do see these women concentrating more on being full-time professional footballers, these types of injuries probably don't occur with the frequency that they have.
Yeah, because you get more. I think if you get more coaching, more athletic training, you can strengthen certain parts of leg muscles and different stuff like that, which may keep these non-contact injuries down to a minimum. And unfortunately, this happens a lot. And I hate going to the anatomy question, but there are questions that sometimes that maybe we need to look at footwear for women, just because of the fact that with wider hips, sometimes it can put a little bit more pressure on the knee joints a little bit in some of the more athletic positions, unfortunately. But we'll have to see. I'm crossing my fingers the day when we don't have 4 or 5 every year, but maybe I'm trying to be too optimistic here. So we won't stay on that topic way too much longer. We will go to probably my favorite part of the entire episode every week, and that is the tipping.
Tips.
And we will go into it. And so we know round 7, and it starts off with quite an interesting little game here. We have up in Metricon Stadium, the Gold Coast Suns hosting the Tigers. Mr. Brian Barrish, who do you have coming out victorious in this one?
We have a Suns team which has been eliminated from the finals against a Tigers team that needs to win to stay alive. That's one of the many permutations here, is that the Tigers need to win, because if they lose, or if Melbourne wins and they are eliminated, I think, Richmond's been waiting for a game like this. I think if they play against the North Melbourne like they had this week, they lose. But against the Gold Coast team, they win. So I'm going to tip the Tigers.
Yeah, I will agree. I am a momentum footy person, and the Richmond Tigers, though they did lose last week, I still think they've got a lot of really good momentum. Hopefully, Mo Conti is back this week, which will only make them that much more dangerous in the midfield. I will tip the Tigers here. I will not say, I will say this: over the last few weeks, I have grown to really enjoy watching this Tigers team play footy. It was really sad to not see Mo Conti play this week, but hopefully she will be back for that midfield. But even if she isn't, I still think this Tigers team just has just a little too much.
They're a fun team to watch. They
Oh,
really are.
absolutely. Absolutely. They're absolutely so much fun to watch. Moving on from that, and quite an interesting going down to RESA Park with St. Kilda hosting the GWS Giants. Who do you have in this one and why?
Well, this is an interesting part. The interesting part is this. We mentioned about finals chances, and both of these teams are, slim and none, and slim for one of these teams has their bags packed. We mentioned Melbourne. By the way, Melbourne factors into five different teams' finals possibilities here. Basically, if Melbourne wins, then the loser of this game is eliminated, assuming there is a loser and the game doesn't end in a draw. So you've got two teams that have lost two of their last games. You've got GWS that I think might be playing a little bit better, and it'll be interesting to see. I think how they can, their defense, how they can handle against the St. Kilda side, who I think has been inconsistent this year. I'm gonna say the Giants get the win on the road here.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go. I'm gonna go with you in this one. I think GWS has played a little bit better footy since round one for sure. They do have a win in the last few rounds where St. Kilda has just been struggling. I'm very intrigued to see Elise Parker versus the young pair Patricios and Meyer in the midfield. That's going to be quite an interesting matchup there. And then who of the big forwards is going to have the better day? Are we going to have the G train or are we going to have Miss Scora? Chorus, yeah, I'm
Staunton,
very Cora Staunton for sure, but
Ducky.
yeah, I'm gonna go with the Giants on this one, but I will not be surprised if this game is under 2 goals because I think St. Kilda has a little bit to play for here to try to kind of right their season, though it may not be a final season. It's maybe to right them a little bit going into the off season. We hop from there and in a very intriguing matchup here, going to North Hobart Oval, where the North Tasmanian Kangaroos will host the Dogs, who are licking their wounds from a nice pecking from the Collingwood Magpies. Oh boy, is this an intriguing matchup? Who do you have coming out with the chocolates in this one?
Well, the question is how do the Bulldogs look after that one stumble? Was that 4 game win a fluke, 4 game win streak a fluke, or are they going to be able to recover from it? I think this is one of the worst teams that they could go off if they think they're going to end this streak. I think the Kangas have it going on now that they've gotten those 2 losses in a row out of the way. It's a home game. Teams don't notoriously play very well in Tassie. I think the Kangaroos will win this one. I think it'll be a close game. We might even see a similar game to how against Collingwood, but it's all going to be about how they got to play 4 quarters. They can't just let them hang around for. They can't just hang around for a half and then they need to have total control over all 4 quarters. So I think the Kangaroos win this one. We'll say by about 3 goals. I think.
Yeah, this one is rather intriguing because I want to know what doggies playing team is going to show up. Is it going to be the doggies team that really kind of outplayed Melbourne a few weeks ago, who honestly there for a while I was thinking was a solid finals team that I think could be could push some teams, or is it going to be the team that kind of laid an egg in the second half against a Collingwood team that, yes, they're good, but I mean, they really hadn't been pushed
Mm-hmm.
that much. And this is a North team that there are questions just as much on them. I mean, a couple of games where I don't think they've played as well. It's one they got beat, and the Carlton game without Matty Prasparkas where they won, but I wasn't as impressed as I think some people were. So I look at this one. It's the midfield matchup. It's the Jazzy Garner versus Ellie Blackburn matchups. I think whoever wins the midfield is going to win this game.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm going to agree with you here. I'm going to go with the Kangas just because when you have one of the elite ruckmen in the game that gives your midfielders the footy first, that is something you just cannot replicate. I like Celine Moody. I think the doggies have a good midfield ruck pair, but I don't know if they've got enough to take down North Melbourne. So
we
I
did
will go with the Kangas.
We didn't mention this, but Danny Marshall had her highest disposal output of the season with 6. I didn't see how many tackles she had because she had 4 tackles in the one game against in the one game last week, but or the week before. But hey, look at Danny Marshall get some numbers in it. Here it is. Marshall had 6. She had 3 tackles this week.
Yep.
So
I think she had one that got her a holding the ball call too, which I thought was really, really good.
Yeah,
she's progressed after sitting out round, I think it was 2
and 3, yeah.
2 and 3. She's come in and she's made an impact. She's not hit the scoreboard, but sometimes you got to have that role player. And when you've got 2 really good forwards and Bonnie Too Good and Izzy Huntington, being able to do the hard yards, maybe almost be the defensive forward a little bit. She's really, really excelled in that role. So I've liked her. I think this will be another test for her going up against some really, really good forwards in North Melbourne. But I'm going to go with the Kangas, but I agree with you. I think this one's close. I think this one's under 2 goals. I think this one could come down to the late stages of the fourth quarter because you just don't know. And Ellie Blackburn is just a superstar. She's going to get her touches. She's going to make an impact on the game. The question is, can North Melbourne minimize that with maybe a Jazzy Garner having a good game in the midfield? So we jump from there and we go from one absolutely marvelous game to another one. This is a midfield battle I cannot wait for. The Melbourne Demons and Casey Fields facing the Adelaide Crows. Oh boy, this is a titanic matchup here. Who do you have, Mr. Barrish?
Oh, it's really hard not to tip the Crows, but we've seen, as we did a few weeks ago, that they're human. They can lose games like this, but and I think the Demons are playing as well as they can be. I think even though they've lost 2 out of their last 3, I think they might not be in first place, but I think they're playing. I mean, them and Fremantle, I think, are 2 of the hotter, are as hot as Collingwood are. Stevie Lee has the games that she does. If Erin has the games that she does, I mean, Ann Hatchard's going to go la-di-da and pick up 24, 25 disposals. It'll be a question of can the Crows neutralize Paxman? Can they neutralize Pierce? And we've now seen that Daisy can show up anywhere on the field. Maybe she shows up on the forward line, maybe trying to draw some of those defenders back. Who knows? I mean, or maybe the Crows are ready for that and they take care of that. I think the Crows win. This is going to be a really good game. It really is, and hopefully there's a decent crowd enough for it because I think finally that they'll be able to see Aaron Phillips in Melbourne. I think the Crows come out. I think it'll be a relatively close game. I'm going to say 3 goals in this game as well. I think the Crows stake themselves out to an early lead, and then the Demons kind of cut it down towards the end, but Adelaide holds on.
Oh man, yeah, this one is going to be absolutely fun to watch just because that Paxman midfield battle could be quite interesting to see. I agree with you. You kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I'm very intrigued to see, does Daisy Pierce go forward, and does she test a little bit? Maybe see if she gets a tag. Maybe see if she gets a tag with Rakic well, definitely. I'm going to tip the Crows. I've said it a few times, and unfortunately, every time I say it, it's been proven true. Any team with Aaron Phillips is so hard to tip against because she's just so good. But this is a D's team that does have some of the talent in the right places to maybe test Adelaide a little bit. I see this being 12 and below. I see this is under 2 goals just because Casey Fields can be a little windy, and Adelaide is a team that sometimes can be a little off a little bit. They sometimes can miss goals. That really got them against Freo, so we'll have to see there. But Melbourne also had the game against Collingwood where they couldn't kick many goals either. So we'll definitely have to see. This could be who's more accurate in front of goal could win this game as well.
This is remember, this is a Crows team that in that one practice match kicked, I think it was like 2-21 or some 2 goals 21 behinds in one of their games, and it's astounding. I mean, it really is. I mean, but it also shows, and mind you, I don't put a whole lot of stock in the preseason matches. What is it? Dan Lebitard from ESPN says, "I don't care about friendlies. I care about unfriendlies." But by the same token, I mean, yeah, they have to be accurate in front of goals. I think, and the fact that they are the highest scoring team in the league with 322 points. So I think it's going to come down to Melbourne's defense. I think that's going to be the key here. Can they play well on the defensive side of the ball? And that's it. Can they contain Hatchard? Can they contain Thompson? Can they contain Randall? Can they contain Phillips? If the answer is yes, they have a chance. If the answer is no, it might be more than that. It might get absolutely ugly. You never can tell with AFLW. I mean, games that we think are going to be close can end up being 4, 5, 6 goal affairs at least. So we'll see. But I'm confident with Adelaide, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I still say this is going to be a good
Oh,
one.
it'd be a fantastic.
We move on from there from Casey Fields up to Icon Park, and this is an eliminator game as Carlton hosts the Fremantle Dockers, coming off that amazing win over West Coast. And I gotta say, could this be the end of Carlton's season if they cannot beat the Freo Dockers?
Well, for all intents and purposes, probably. I mean, they've got Gold Coast in round 8, and then looking at round 9, they've got the Giants. So there is a chance, and you figure 5 wins might get you into the finals, depending on. I mean, if they lose, then their destiny is out of their own hands. It has to be said. The problem is that their players are going to have to step up the way that they do. Hosking's going to have a game. Prespakis is going to have a big game.
Mm-hmm.
They almost have to play the perfect game defensively, especially 268 points. They're the best percentage in the league, 268 to 94. That's the other side. I mean, Fremantle's defense, and I mean, you also do have to consider the fact. Let's take this with a grain of salt. 2 of those games have come against the Eagles.
Well, the first one was really, really close. That was played in a downpour, and it wasn't nearly like this last game was a little bit more.
This was a little bit more arid,
sure.
yeah.
But I think this one's going to be it's going to be the test of, can Carlton's defense keep the run and go Freo. I mean, with Roxy Rude, Duffy, and Gemma Houghton, where they just it's almost like soccer. They just want to put it out and let you run onto it. Is Freo's kind of game there for a bit, and can Loifi and some of their defensive minded players be able to sit back, not get sucked up to the ball, to where they give space behind them for them to let their runners get kind of get over the back. So I'll definitely see, can the structure be there to hold Freo in front of them? If they can, I think this brings the game a little closer. If they can't, Freo could run away with this one for sure.
And I think that I think, again, we talk about all these offensive stars. I think it's a matter of like you said, are they going to be able to contain them? I don't think they are. I think as good as Carlton is and as good as Carlton shows, but this is a question of what kind of Carlton team are we going to see? Are we going to see the team that has upset it there? I mean, they have won 3 out of their last 4, and we said at the beginning of the year they were completely dead in the water. They lost that opening game to Collingwood. They struggled in the first couple of weeks of the season, but now, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think Fremantle will win. I think this is another close game. I think this is probably about a 2-3 goal game tops, but we'll have to see. Icon Park. They are playing this at Icon, I believe. Yeah. So it should be. It's funny. I've gone all the way down and looked at the other one. Yeah, they are playing at Icon Park. I think home field advantage is a big thing here, but Freo wins the game, and we'll say by 15 points.
I'm with you. I'm with you there. I think Carlton will keep it close. I think some of the defensive structure will kind of keep this game close, but I think Freo has just got too much talent there, just a little too much for Carlton. And I think this is kind of the year that you kind of take a few things a little bit. You work on some of your youth players for it, and you pack up for next year. Unfortunately, we move on from that. Let's hop out of Victoria up to Queensland, up to Hickey Park, and the game of the round, Brisbane v Collingwood. Does Collingwood's 0 in the loss column go away, or can they keep their undefeated streak alive?
This is the round that they lose. That's my pick of the week. It's funny because Collingwood and the Lions, think about the Lions' first season in AFLW when they looked like they were going to kind of march in and win everything, and then they had that one hiccup at the end of the year. I think Collingwood is due for I think they're due for a clunker. They're due for an absolute clunker. And I think I still think it's going to be a close match, and I think especially like if Wuchner can get started again, some of these players now, mind you, player like Bree Davy and them, they could prove me wrong, especially if Bree gets the type of game. I mean, she's going to have one game where she has 30 touches. It might not be against this Brisbane team that does play so well defensively, but I'm going to say Brisbane wins the game and knocks Collingwood off the schneid.
Oh man, I think this might be the first one we disagree. I'm gonna go Collingwood. I'm the Pies just continued to prove why they're so good. Their defense is solid. Their midfield with Davy, Kiochi, and just they're so good. Tani Brown's come in as a youngster and still played really well. They're forward. Yes, they lose Membry to the MCL injury, but then Mallory comes in, kicks the first goal in the first goal club, just like Danny Marshall. And Chloe Malloy is an absolute gun. You just cannot let her get the footy in her hands inside 50, or she is a chance to kick a goal. I'm going to go the Pies in this one, but I think this is a goal or maybe a couple of points, maybe 8-point game max, because I think I agree. Brisbane has got the defensive structure to be able to keep this game close. It's the Dakota
I,
Davidsons. It's their forwards. Can they kick goals against that stout, tough defense of Livingston, Malloy, and Livingston, Schleicher, and Butler? Can they get the goals? Because if they can't, Collingwood showed that they can get by a pretty good defense of the Western Bulldogs.
I feel like if they're going to have a bad game, it might be here. I mean, they got to travel up. I believe this is their first trip interstate in the season,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to have another one to end the season in Adelaide. But I think it's going to be a close game. But I'm tipping Brisbane. This is my upset special of the week.
It's this would be the one if I had an upset, but I don't know. I'm on the Pies. I'm on the
I,
Pies and
I don't
the
think you
Pies
can
and
go
the
wrong.
Tigers have been the two teams I've been the most impressed with this
Yeah.
entire season. I'm not even going to lie. In the last couple of podcasts, Chloe Malloy has become my favorite player. She's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely insane with a couple of her goals. So I'd love to chat with her eventually. That would be an absolutely amazing conversation, but we will talk about that another time. And the last game, I normally I would say anticlimactic, but I'm quite interested in this game just because somebody's going to get their first win of the season. We have West Coast hosting the Geelong Cats. Who is the team that gets to get a win in this one?
Well, I hate to correct the host, but the Eagles do already have a win, Donnie.
Oh
They
yes,
defeated they
yes they
defeated
do.
Gold Coast, but that's okay. The Eagles again. The Eagles need to win to keep their very scant finals hopes alive. Of course, if Melbourne wins earlier, it's all shot to heck. But the you know what the Eagles. These are two teams that again I think they're I think Geelong is probably the healthier of the two. I think they're the better put together of the two. This will be, I believe, their first road trip of the year going interstate. Um, so I think this is the year this is the week that they actually have a good solid game and it pays off from them. I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a scrappy game. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think maybe 3 goals wins it, which is not it's not the greatest thing to say, but I don't see this being like a high scoring goal fest. I think whichever team makes the least mistakes here, and I think Geelong has played better consistently over the last few weeks. So I'm gonna say they'll get the win in a low scoring and scrappy game at fabled Mineral Resources Park.
For sure. I agree. I think Geelong just has a tiny bit more positive momentum going from their games because they've played some of the tougher teams in that first and second quarters really tough, where unfortunately West Coast is just they've kind of been blown out early and just kind of survived, except for that nice little nail biter with Gold Coast a couple of weeks ago where it was pretty close most of the game. I think this is another one that's close. The one thing I got to give this week when it comes to all the matchups is the fact that almost all these games are so tight.
Mhm.
It's hard to really decipher who's the better team sometimes with a few of these. I will tip the Cats on the road. The Dana Hooker injury has just really let the air out of the proverbial balloon for this West Coast Eagles team, unfortunately. But that, sir, would be the end of the round when it comes to tipping. I don't know if great minds think alike or what, but I think there was only one game that we differed on, and that was probably going to be the most interesting one to watch on the weekend. So this
Well,
has
listen, you following me, I don't think is a very because if you remember, we tipped when we tipped the AFL finals, you and I tipped the same four teams in the first round, and I think all four of them lost.
Yeah, it happens. Nobody says we're perfect. I never said my tipping was perfect. I actually the AFLW have been pretty good. I got nipped a couple of times. Like I know I had Frio beating Brisbane for sure. So that's why I was a little iffy on this Collingwood pick, but I don't know. This is going to be quite interesting. But
Yeah.
Brian, another amazing conversation. You and I have always been able to chat footy. It's always great to find another guy that's almost as crazy into this game as I am.
Well, you got the crazy part right.
I know for sure. So I will give you this opportunity. I know several people on this platform have heard you before, but we will let you. I know you do a podcast here for the USAFL. If you want to do kind of what that podcast is and kind of some of the other ways to get a hold of you on social media.
So, as Donnie mentioned at the top of the show, I think because it was a while ago, I am the media manager of the United States Australian Football League. So all the stuff that you see on the social media is mostly me. We do have a couple of helpers. Donnie helps out from time to time too, because he's a good dude. No, so Marks and Stripes is the name of my podcast. We're hoping we've had 14 episodes out last year. You can go back and listen to them wherever you listen to your podcast, Google, on Apple, iTunes, Wooshka for the time being as well. And basically, we interview just a lot of people from the USAFL community. I'm sure our listeners, if you don't know, there's a USAFL. By all means, we talk to some, and especially this International Women's Day, we try to talk to at least one player from or figure from the women's community each round. Lori Roop, who's the president of the USAFL Umpires Association, I think we did on our first or second episode. We did we interviewed her. I think it would have been in the second episode. We have Rosemary Quokka was on our first episode, who played in the Northern Territory before COVID came along. So go back and listen to that. We hope to have some new episodes starting in April. And if you want to follow the USAFL on social media, our website is usafl.com. Facebook is facebook.com/USAFL. Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, we are USAFL 1997. And if for some reason you think I am at least mildly interesting and you want to follow along with me on Twitter, I'm at Barrish USAFL. That's BARRISH USAFL.
Mildly entertaining is an understatement. So you are quite an entertaining watch on Twitter. I will vouch for you on that. And for Aussie fans that are listening to this, if you want to see a little bit of the USAFL product, please check out the USAFL YouTube page. There are games from our last national championship. Unfortunately, that was 2019 due to COVID, but there are several games, including my boys, the Des Moines Roosters, have a couple of games on there. And it has women's games as well, being National Women's Day. We have both the Division 1 and 2 finals on there as well. Please go check it out. Please support our clubs, because we're always looking for Aussie supporters as well. And I don't know about you, sir, but I think that'll kind of do it for us today. I know it is getting quite late out there for
It's
you
past my
out in
bedtime.
Philadelphia. I know it's getting pretty late here in Des Moines as well. So we will wrap it up. Fourth and Long fans, this has been your footy correspondent, Donnie Hess, with Brian Barrish, my co-host, and we will see you next week with another review of AFLW.